we might as well get started. This is the final ACHF Open the Floodgate seminar. I want to acknowledge the generous grant that was awarded to me by the Arts Cultural Heritage Fund of the City of Windsor, allowing to make these educational seminars possible. If you're tuning into this on YouTube, there are two prior seminars that inform some of the things that we're talking about, not all of them, but some of them. And if you see a value in this presentation, then there's a good chance, if you're an artist or musician, that the prior two seminars would be of value to you as well. And they will be linked below in the description. You can find them there, especially the one regarding social media, because this is all about merchandising. Building a good audience on social media and developing yourself there is going to give you a great platform to create sales from an e-commerce perspective. But we'll be getting to that a little bit later on in the seminar. I guess what we'll start with is just kind of a basic overview of the things that we're going to be talking about today, which is merchandising and monetization, which is extremely important for artists and musicians. Of course, we need to make a living from what we do. In the current situation, obviously for musicians, playing live beyond a live stream is not really an opportunity, and that is where musicians see a lot of their income. The same goes for visual artists, though, as well, in that the exhibition halls are not open, art galleries are not necessarily open and exhibiting currently. So creating some other platforms and avenues to generate sales for your work is extremely important. So we're just going to talk about kind of broadly some of the more subjective aspects of art and what it is and what makes a quality product. We're going to talk about some of the more objective aspects of art in the sense of making it profitable and presenting it and selling it to the public. We're going to talk about pricing. I think this is a little bit more leans to visual artists, but I think musicians can find a value in this as well, breaking down kind of your time and what you put into projects. Some general business practices that you'll be able to use to kind of mitigate the investments that you're making and ensure that your projects are profitable. We're going to talk about expediting our process when we can, creating a ladder for your customers, creating a digital approach, as well as where to sell your goods and some options therein. So I guess the first thing that I really want to start is what makes art, or what makes good merchandise. And so my friend Kevin Kavanaugh and I, over a few drinks one night, started to develop a list. And that list was kind of the subjective aspects of making art versus the objective aspects of selling art. And I keep this little list that I made that night tacked up on my wall beside my computer where I do all my designing and all my work, so that I can continually evaluate the kind of projects that I'm working on and make sure that I'm hitting my mark, or that at least that I feel like I'm hitting my mark. So what is that mark, and what makes, quote unquote, good art? And I would say to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt, at least these next like 5 points that I'm going to make, in the sense that these are all extremely subjective to the viewer. But that being said, I think that this is what viewers and audiences are generally looking for when they're engaging with creations, original creations by artists on any scale and at any level. And the first one is craftsmanship and technicality. And I'm not going to dig too deeply into all of these because they are so subjective, but that would just be the quality of the product that you're producing. Is it industry standard? Have you made it to a quality that is at the level of your peers and the people who are at the highest levels of the industry? You know, if you would take a, a finely tuned finished product and give it a 10, where do you fall on that scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the crafting and the technicality that went into creating this piece of art or piece of merchandise? The second one would be social relevance and relatability. So what does it mean to the audience? How are they going to digest it? Is it something that is in the zeitgeist? Is it going to be relatable to them? Are they going to be able to connect with it on a level that is going to make them want to invest? So there's that point. The next point is, and I think this is an easy one for a lot of us working in the arts, is the aesthetic value. Does it, again, completely subjective, but does it look good to the eye when you look at it? Do you enjoy looking at it? Are you going to enjoy looking at it for, an expanded period of time? The fourth one would be creativity and originality. Is this something that no one else has done before? Is this a brand new idea? Is this an idea that has been co-opted and made into something completely new, reimagined as something that no one has ever seen before? There's value in that. And then the fifth one, which is a little bit more abstract, but and we originally didn't have this, I came up with this one after the fact, is resonance. And what I mean by resonance is when you hear something or see something and experience something, what kind of mark does it leave on you, on your mind? Will you remember it the way that it was after the fact? Will you be able to see it in your mind's eye after the fact? And then how long will you be able to see it? And that is the resonance of something. If something impacts you in a major way, and you can see it as clearly today as you did when you saw that band perform live, you can hear it in your mind's ear, you can see it in your mind's eye when you went to that gallery and saw that amazing painting, and it's left a mark on you that you remember it, you think about it, that it's in your headspace for an expanded period of time. So these 5 aspects of art: craftsmanship and technicality, social relevance and relatability, aesthetic value, creativity and originality, as well as resonance. Again, these are subjective terms, and obviously anyone looking at art is going to gauge these things differently. But when I'm making my art, when I'm designing my merchandise to sell to people, I think about these 5 aspects, and I think about where am I scoring? If I'm honest with myself, where am I scoring on a level of 1 to 10 on these 5 things? And I generally would say, if you can feel like you're scoring high, or, if you're testing out your sound or your imagery to your audience or some trusted advisors, colleagues, friends, these are the kind of 5 things that you're going to be interested to know about and to hear about. And I would argue that if you can score, high points on even just one of those 5 aspects, that you may have on your hands a very sellable piece of merchandise or art. If you feel like you're not scoring high on any of those levels, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing table and think about what you're presenting and what you're putting out there, and start retooling things and seeing what the response is after that. And seeing what your response is really great today, because we have the internet at our fingertips. And if you tuned into the last seminar, it means that you learned about social media and building your audience. You can query your audience. You can put mock-ups and ideas and snippets and the skeleton of a song out there, maybe as a live stream performance, and see what the response is, and kind of retool and re-engage with that information at your fingertips. So you can basically develop your merch or your art to score high on one of these aspects. And I would say if you're scoring high on all of these aspects, well, then maybe you've got a masterpiece on your hand. But when we move away from the more subjective aspects of making, again, quote unquote, good art or merchandise, then we're going to the things that are a little bit more objective. And these are really the three things that go into, to me, selling art and merchandise, which is 6. I guess we finished at 5. Now this is 6, 7, and 8, because they very much do tie together. Because it's one thing to make art, and if that's your only goal, great. But a lot of us are making these creations with the hope to be able to sell them, to be able to profit off of them, and to be able to make a living off of them. So these next 3 more objective aspects of good art or good merchandise are really what is going to bring you to a successful path. And that first one is context. You need to be able to explain the art that you're making. You need to be able to talk about it in an extremely articulate way. You should have an elevator pitch. You should have a meeting pitch. You need to know your art, whether it's your song, whether it's your album, whether it's your painting, whatever it is that you've created. You need to know all the ins and outs of it. You need to be ready to answer questions that people have about it. When people really start investing in your work, a lot of the time, they want to know the context. They might not understand the value of it until it's explained to them. A lot of times, and I've worked with many artists over the years and exhibited my own art on a lot of different levels, and there are often times where somebody walks up and may see something that you have for sale and scoff at what the price is. But if you are able to explain to them what went into it, what the thought process was, what the technical aspects and the craftsmanship aspects are, what value there is in terms of social relevance or relatability. It doesn't mean that you need to be hitting all of these nails, but if the context is your ammo to convince somebody of the value that the item that you've created holds. So if you can't talk about it, not many other people are going to be able to. So you have to be ready to explain your work, talk about your work, the process behind it, the work that went into it, create that value by contextualizing the work that you've done and explaining the work that you've done. The next one is presentation. So presentation is extremely important. I've seen fantastic visual artists and fantastic musicians over the years present their work so poorly that it detracts from the real value that their work carries. So they made a beautiful painting that is relatable, socially relevant, aesthetically valuable, has great craftsmanship, but they take this beautiful piece of art that they made and they put it in a dollar store frame. Or they don't frame it at all and they just hang it on the wall with a tack. You know, how you present the work very much infers the value that it carries. If you're the person who's selling something and you put it on the wall with a dollar frame, it infers to the audience and the viewer that you don't see as much value in it as potentially, you know, there might actually be. And it can oftentimes dissuade people from, you know, purchasing your work or getting behind your work. If I can take an example in terms of musicians, I would say in terms of CDs, is that, you know, and maybe it's not as quite common the case nowadays, but I remember back in the day, bands coming out with just burned CDs with their name and the album title written on it, on a Memorex or whatever company made this thing, and you can see it on the inner ring. A little bit of research, with a little bit of foresight, a little bit of design time, for next to the exact same price as producing a CD and writing the information on it. You can just as easily present something that looks professional, doesn't have any writing on the inner ring, has a clean typeface on it that anyone can see, that anyone can read, and that comes in, you know, a package that seems professional and seems worth the value that you're asking for. And then the last aspect, the eighth aspect of, you know, making good art, selling good art, to me is profitability. If you're not able to make a profit off of the work that you're doing, then you are digging a grave for yourself that you will seldom be able to get out of. If your work is not profitable, then there's really just not going to be very many options for you to keep going. And that's what we want to do. We need to sustain ourselves. We need to keep going. A lot of times, in my experience as somebody who has curated and organized probably over 100 visual arts exhibitions, hundreds of independent music shows at venues of, you know, 50 people to 500 people. I have been on the organizing end, and I've been on the representation end of literally hundreds of artists and musicians. And oftentimes what I see is that there is a real disconnect between creators and the prices that they place on the work that they're creating. You really need to start making friends with your spreadsheet, whether it's numbers or Excel or Google Sheets. You need to make friends with the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is what you use to document everything that you do, everything that you're working on, all the investments that you're making, whether those investments are investments of time for process, creation, research, whether those investments are monetary in terms of supplies, whether those investments are go beyond that. But you really need to start documenting what it is you're doing. So the first one, in terms of creating profitability, is understanding your time, the amount of time that you're putting into something. You need to start documenting your hours, treating your art and music projects like a job, saying, you know, I'm clocking in here, and I'm going to, before I start songwriting, before I start designing, before I start painting, I'm going to say, you know, it's 7:29 p.m. I'm clocking in. Clock your hours. Understand how much time you're putting into something, and that will help you to understand how much it's worth. Now, how much is your time worth? That you tell me. That's a hard question for me to just answer for you. I guess that really depends on what your aspirations are, what your situation is. Are we trying to put food on the table with this? Is this a side hustle until it gets busy enough for you to quit your everyday job? You really want to understand the amount of time that you're putting into your projects and documenting all of that time, and then coming up with an hourly rate for yourself. You're going to want to understand exactly how much you're putting in so that you know how much to charge. So let's say, for example, you want to make $25 an hour. Okay, that's your fixed rate for your time. Your supplies. What are your supplies? What is needed to be able to produce the work that you're doing? And that can go into, as a graphic designer, the fees that you have for your Creative Cloud, for your Adobe Creative Cloud. That can go into equipment rentals that you need to record. That can go into production costs of any kind. Those are your supplies. And again, all of these supplies, you start treating your art and music more like a business, and all of these supplies, all of these things that you're buying, keep your receipts. Document what you're spending, what you're buying, the cost of producing all of these works. You can write a lot of those receipts off at the end of the year. Understand that yourself as a visual artist, as a musician, you are essentially running a small business, and you can write a lot of that off. The space that you have. Now, this is part of my apartment, but I write off this room as my studio. This is where I work. So a chunk of my rent receipts gets written off towards my working space. This is where I draw. This is where I do my graphic design. This is where I record audio. This is where I practice for my music. All these shelves are filled with merch and products, and so this is part of my fixed cost. So understand all of your fixed costs and mark them down and budget them into what you're creating. And then you want to start creating a multiplier. No, there have been a lot of times where artists have shown up to an exhibition, show me a beautiful painting that they created, and give me a price of $100. And I'll do a double blink and say $100. How long did this take you to make? Oh, I spent about 15, 20 hours on it. How much did the supplies cost to make it? Well, between the oil paint and the canvas, it was about $80 right there. So, at $100 for this painting that you put 20 hours into, if I was pricing something like this, I would say, well, you're not at a break-even point. Let's even just call it minimum wage at 20 hours to create this thing, or let's call it 10 hours just for easy math. There's $150. Your supplies to create it were $80. Now that's $230. That's your break-even point. So this person who's showing up with a painting for $100, when they put that much time and that much expense into it, they're taking close to a $200 hit. $230, that is a break-even point. To me, if you want to create a sustainable operation for yourself, you're going to have at least a 2 to 3 times multiplier on that cost. So between your hours and the supplies that cost you $200, you need to be charging in the area of $400 to $600 to keep your project sustainable. Because A, you have to pay yourself for your time so that you can continue doing it. And B, you need to make the money to be able to reinvest into the project, to be able to make more art, more expansive art, be able to merchandise your work to another level. You need to have an expanding flow of money. And if you are underselling yourself or selling yourself at a break-even point, you will never reach that level of being able to become truly profitable. When it comes to time, and I guess this is a thing more for visual artists, is that with time, you want to be able to try to expedite your process where you can. If you are making an addition of paintings, and they're all quite similar, it's actually a time saver to work on 10 paintings at the same time than it is to work on them one at a time. And sometimes you may be limited in terms of the space that you have to work. Um, but if you're doing a blanket background, it's much faster to, spray paint all of them, let them dry, or create kind of a factory style kind of process where you cut down on your dead time by allowing, let's say, as a painter, one canvas to dry while you are speccing out the next one. That one's drying while you're speccing out the next one. You're creating a chain of work for yourself so that you're not killing your hours. But in terms of selling your work, and this is where we really get into merchandising, is creating a ladder for your customers. One of the things that I see with artists more than anything, selling on all sorts of different levels, from the really big name artists all the way down to artists that are just starting out, is that oftentimes there is no ladder for the audience to climb. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of different people out there in a lot of different financial situations, and we need to create an opportunity for anyone in any situation to support you, the artist, financially, whether that's through a $5 purchase, $20 purchase, $20,000 purchase. There needs to be a ladder for the people who want to spend big, but also the number of people who want to spend small. And I can tell you, as somebody, again, who's represented a number of different artists over the years at festivals, at trade shows, at art exhibitions, is that the most success comes with artists who have a ladder. So let's talk about what a ladder is. And I guess before I talk about that, I'll just talk about going digital. Going digital is extremely important for both artists and musicians. When you go digital, merchandising truly becomes possible. Taking the designs or original designs that you've done in the form of a painting and reimagining that digitally will give you the ability to be able to monetize and merchandise the work that you're doing. And in the same token as graphic design, photography goes hand in hand with that, especially with visual artists, because perhaps you are not going to redesign your painting graphically, but you can just as easily light it correctly, take a digital photograph of it, and now you have something to make prints and stickers and a variety of different items with photo print t-shirts. There are options if you don't know graphic design, but graphic design, even just the basics, which you can learn on YouTube, a few days of watching YouTube tutorials on Photoshop, on Adobe Illustrator, on Procreate, if you have an iPad, you can learn a ton of skills that can take your basic designs and elevate them to the next level, or can save you a lot of money in terms of having an artist create a logo or a design for you that you can then augment and reimagine in a variety of different ways. And this is what's going to help you create a ladder. And so when I talk about a ladder, I talk about rungs that people can climb depending on how much money they have to spend. And I've always been of the mindset is, I don't care how much you have to spend. I just want your money. Whether it's $5, $10, $20, I want to give you something of value for whatever you're willing to spend. And a big problem, what I see with visual artists in particular, is that, they'll have the $500 original painting, and that's it. That's where the ladder starts. And for a lot of us, myself included, $500 is a tough starting point. And what you really want to do is create a really low starting point for people. And I would even encourage, from a promotional standpoint, making the first rung on the ladder free. And what is free? Well, free is a business card or a download card. Free is a sticker or one of those classic style buttons. I'll grab one here. Not a lapel pin, but a button. Just like and Ricky will talk about buttons, and he made his start with buttons. So these are the things that are a little bit easier. They're such low cost, but they're a promotional tool. You can give them for free. Somebody wears this on their shirt, and they ask what the name is. Somebody asks them about it. They tell them the name of your project. The next rung on the ladder, I talk about lapel pins, sticker packs, magnets, small items. Lapel pins are great. They're, this is one that I got from Serengeti. That's a $10 sale for him, US. So we're talking, $13 or $14 now, Canadian. And this probably only cost them, $2, $3 to produce. So that's a really good profit margin for him and very little work. On the next rung of the ladder, we're talking about records. We're talking about CDs, prints, shirts, that kind of stuff. That's your $20 to $40 range. The next rung on the ladder, we're talking about box sets. Maybe you've created 2 or 3 vinyl records over the last few years. Maybe you box them together and give a bit of a discount. Maybe you have unlimited prints that you make an unlimited number of at a smaller size, 8x10 for visual artists out there, an 8x10, a standard frameable size. And when I talk about prints, I always say, know your frameable sizes and understand that those are going to sell much more easily than off-size things. You want to frame or size your prints to be able to, in posters for musicians, these items that you're going to be selling, size them to a scale that they can be framed easily. If they're an off size, it oftentimes results in no sale. I can say from my experience selling art prints, because a lot of people know, and people who are familiar with framing, it gets expensive and it gets expensive quickly. So if you're an off size and you need a specific size frame made, that deters a lot of buyers. So be frame friendly with your prints. When you go up that next level, we're talking about box sets, we're talking about limited edition prints. Spend a little bit more money. Use a higher end quality print. Go, splurge on some G-clays. Make these prints limited edition. I'm only making 10 of these. 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. They're all signed. They're all numbered. We're creating a ladder for people. Now, after that, we're talking about originals in editions. So let's say a painting, you've got 10 1-foot paintings. They're all the same design, but they're all made by hand. That's your next rung of the ladder. And then your final rung of the ladder is your original one-off. There is only one of this that exists or will ever exist. You have the original. And by creating this ladder, the real value in it is that you will be able to up the prices of your original work. It's a hard leap for a lot of people to get to a $500 price tag, let's say on an original painting. But if they see a $10 pin and a $25 print and a $35 t-shirt and a $100 limited edition print that there are only 10 of, and then they have the original painting that there's only 1 of, it starts to make a little bit more sense to them as the buyer, as the consumer, where that value is coming from. Okay, well, if just an unlimited 8x10 of this costs $25 and a limited edition 12x18 costs $100, then yeah, it makes a little bit more sense that the original painting, 24 by 36 made by hand, only one person gets to have it. That makes a little bit more sense to me at $500. When you don't have the ladder to climb, it can be a harder leap for people to make. It doesn't mean that they won't make it, but I think you're leaving a lot on the table in terms of the number of sales that you can make. And I've always been of the mindset, I would rather sell 100 people something for $5 than I would sell one person something for $500. I'd rather get my message out to 100 different people and create the opportunity for that message to be seen by an even greater exponential of people than I would be happy to have just one thing go to one person. So take that as you will. And then after that, we've got our items. We've started merchandising our things. We're going to talk about merchandising with Eric in just a moment. But where do you sell these items? And of course, you're selling them at your shows, at your exhibitions. You can set up e-commerce. There are a lot of really easy and cheap options nowadays for creating a nice, good-looking website at a very reasonable price, whether it's through Squarespace, whether it's through Shopify. Beyond that, in terms of merchandising, there are even further that you can go if you want to remove the work and you're not as tied to your profit margins. There are drop shipping options. There are printing options. You can set up a site with a handful of designs and let someone else do all the work for you and collect a smaller cut, but put zero time in. There are options available to you that can open the door and create a gateway to potentially making things that you wouldn't have the budget to do otherwise. Pre-sales, queue rates, Bandcamp Final, where people pre-order your content so that you have the financial ability to produce that run. So now I'm going to bring Eric in on the conversation here.
What's up?
Hey, I want to bring your video in on things as well, just so that we can both be on the screen here. Hey, there he is.
What's up, bud?
How are you? Thanks so much for taking the time.
Dude, of course, man. Any old time.
And so you caught a little bit of what I was talking about there, and I didn't get too deeply into taking your digital designs and merchandising them because that's kind of your specialty. That's what you've been doing for how long now? Almost 20 years?
I wish. It's only been just over 11. Well, I mean, if you count the button time.
I count push my buttons.
Okay,
That
then
to
if
me
you
is
count
where you really started. So
yeah,
maybe start from push my buttons and the snips days and tell people who you are and what you've done.
Okay, so I started a button company like the ones you were showing earlier, or at least talking about, the little 1-inch buttons. Started those in 2004. And then I was doing that, making them for the bands. I pretty much just wanted to make them for my own band. And then from there, I just kept getting orders. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm reaching out to all these bands I know. And it's starting to kind of like, tumble along. And then I'm like, man, I got to make the shirts, because there's this one dude in town. He was really cool, but also really, really weird. And he had like wicked long hair. He was a wicked banger. And this guy was making crazy money. I don't mean like printing in the way that we do, where we like have customers and we fulfill their orders. He was doing bootleg tees. So he would make an AC/DC live at Madison Square Garden, 1978 or whatever. And he would steal that graphic on the internet, print it, and then sell it on eBay for like hundreds of dollars. So he was basically a ripoff artist, but like he let me down into his shop and he showed me what was going on and how it all worked and everything. And I'm like, man, this is so cool. So I was into it right away. And then I bought a bunch of used stuff. Same deal as what I did with Push My Buttons. Reached out to all those bands I knew. Introduced me to your friend's band. That band introduced me to your friend's band. then kept going like that. And then now here we are, I guess, 16 years later, still in Welland, and we're cooking, baby. Although the COVID thing right now sucks, but what are you gonna do?
So tell me a little, so Push My Buttons eventually became Press Time Design and Screen
Yep,
Printing.
yep.
Tell me a little bit about the services that you guys offer to artists and bands and how they can start creating some profitability from the work that they've already been doing.
Well, to be honest, for the most part, usually people are kind of hitting us up with they already have an idea of their own. They're like, "Hey, this is my artwork. I want to do this. I want to make a pin. I want to put this on hats or whatever." And I feel that my job more so is to try and advise them what I think will work in a technical aspect first. Like, hey, this piece of art that you sent me is great, but it's not going to work well with this application. You're going to get a product where people aren't going to dig it as much as you think they are, because your super detailed artwork just isn't going to fly on this thing. Why don't we print that on a t-shirt or other things like that?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, then I will advise, like, in another way, that's less technical and a little more about taste. But I don't really do that unless somebody's kind of asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost in the same way with a music producer. Like, if you go in, they should be trying to do as good as possible for you on a technical level. But when it comes to the actual art, I'm not positive that it's their role to necessarily say, well, I think that this chorus would be better or whatever. So that's where I kind of watch myself when it comes to that type of stuff. If you want my advice, I'll give it. If you don't, I'm not going to push it on you. I'll just advise in, like, the most technical way possible.
So, and that's something good for visual artists to understand in terms of reimagining their work. And there is a real learning curve in terms of what works on a painting or a digital design versus
Yeah.
what works on a pin or a t-shirt or a hat.
Yes.
These are completely different animals. So something that works in one realm doesn't necessarily mean that it automatically works in another.
Oh, for sure. It's something that we go through with tattoo artists really often, because for the most part, they're all amazing artists. They all, like, know stuff about art and how to create it much better than I do. But sometimes what they give you isn't necessarily like a great application for, say, a t-shirt, because it's shaded the way that they would shade a tattoo, or it's got a zillion color blends that just aren't going to come out well through a screen print, because we'd have to do it in little halftone dots or whatever it is. So it's, yeah, like, it's stuff like that that kind of comes up all the time.
A lot of what I've been talking about through this seminar and the prior ones is the value in self-education. Like, you didn't go to school for this stuff.
No, I didn't really go to school for anything. I kind of just skim by everywhere.
Yeah, and
I
same
got
with me.
51 in every course, just by charm.
I mean, I went to school, I went to college, but I didn't go to college for making art. I didn't go to
Right,
college for selling art or merchandising or any of the things that I really do now.
right.
Do I use some of those skills? Sure, here and there.
Yeah,
But I wanted to, like, kind of illuminate the fact that a lot of this stuff is not stuff that's necessarily taught in schools or colleges anyways. You really do have to be willing to go out there and teach yourself how a lot of these things work.
yeah, most definitely. Like, when it comes to the technical side of, say, screen printing or creating art and all that stuff, so much of it is trial and error, asking people for advice. When it comes to actually business, I do think that there's certain things that can't be taught, or maybe they can, but they're more personality traits that you have to hone in and own, no matter what they are. And I'm not saying that you've got to be Mr. Nice Guy to be successful in business, or there's, like, total jerks that are successful, but they've got other traits that they exploit about themselves. And those are things that I feel like take time to discover and figure out and hone in and try and boost those to the forefront of what it is that you're doing. So it is true, man. Like so much of this stuff really can't be taught in a school. But having said that, if I say went to college for graphic design or marketing, it would probably have helped me earlier on in Press Time's career as a company.
To get you where you're going. And I
Yeah,
guess
for sure.
when we're talking about merchandising and imagining, and what the advice I oftentimes give to artists is, how can you reimagine the work you've already done,
Yeah,
and repackage it in a way that people can consume? And I always feel like that's where someone like you really comes in, is that, and that's a value in going to a business like Press Time, is that you can walk through the door and say, here's my work, here's what I've done, what are my different avenues, what are my options, what do I need to do to get my designs in a place
right.
that I'm going to be able to merchandise them.
For sure. Oh yeah, and that kind of stuff happens all the time. And then as these relationships develop, where with us and artists, and who we work a ton with artists. I mean, almost everything we do is in the art field, be it music, tattoo shops, artists, Etsy people, all that kind of stuff. Where was I going with that?
I guess we were talking about just like merchandising and making something tangible, and how
Right. Sorry.
business
Yes.
like Press Time.
I got off my topic for a second. Yes, absolutely. And as that relationship develops, more and more, they start to be ahead of the curve. So they're like thinking to themselves like, oh, Ricky's gonna, bust me up about this. So I'm already gonna beat him to the punch and have my file prepared like this. Or, oh, he's already told me that these little shading things don't work well in screen printing. Cool. I'm not going to include them in this. Sure. I'm going to do a digital print on a poster. So I'll have them there, but on my t-shirt, I'm going to do it, with halftone dots. And then they start to develop those different skills. I'm not saying because of me. I'm just saying as they become more educated, they start to see it. Almost like with a producer. I mean, with any of the bands that I've been in, there's been producers in the beginning who will like really bust us up about songwriting and like, oh, what, like, why this? Why not here? Do that. And then over time, you start to not edit yourself, but you start to be like, yeah, that probably isn't going to work. So it's not even going to get as far as the producer because we already know that sucks. So like, we don't have to get there for him to tell us.
You're coming into it with enough knowledge to avoid wasting your own time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to say in terms of, and I think, it's been a learning curve for myself as I work towards creating my own brand and merchandising a lot of my designs, is that there is this huge learning curve, and that having someone like you and working with a company that is established kind of helps you through some of those, to get the training wheels off, to be able to start reaching out, because of course you guys focus in on screen print, and lapel pins and a variety of different items, but there are so many other options out there in terms of the items that you can create with your designs. Having an understanding of working with companies is going to only really, prepare you to be able to take advantage of those options that are out there. Now, I'm out there making matchbooks and post-it notes and postcards and all sorts of like different items that maybe you wouldn't generally have on a merch table.
Yeah.
But I think that, working with a company like yours really helps, I think, bands to get a footing in terms of how they, approach the whole animal of trying to really make a profitable merch table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a reason why we attract like bands and artists and tattoo shops and breweries and stuff like that. is for all those reasons that you just said. Is like they know that we've helped other bands take the training wheels off, so to speak. So they're like, okay, perfect. Yeah. I already know Press Time because they printed all the merch for this favorite band that I know, or my buddy's band. So in a way, it's like they're already familiar with us and they have some sort of expectation. So I think I think it helps us, to be honest. It's like our own little niche that we've carved out, but all the while that we've been doing it, we've been getting more educated on what's going on in whatever scene it is that we're working in or whatever niche. Because when it's, say, something like sports, we print next to no sport stuff. And sport wear is like such a huge part of our industry, and we almost don't touch any of it. And it's because we don't attract sport people, which is cool. I mean, that's fine. We will print for them or whatever. If anyone walks through the door, sure. But I think that people are more so looking at us from an artist standpoint.
I guess we'll just finish up. Any last thoughts? Any tips or pitfalls that you think that people sometimes run into that could be easily avoided? Anything that you think would be good first advice for somebody who's looking at merchandising their work?
Do what you think is cool. Always. I feel like that at any level. There's some bands out there that are huge, and like, in my opinion, the merch isn't great. I don't mean like technically, it's just like not my taste, for example, but they're doing it because it's their aesthetic. It's what they think is cool. And then their fans adhere to that. So I just don't think that you should try and bend your artistic vision to what's happening. And that even goes even deeper when you're, say, looking at which t-shirt to print on. Print on the one that you like, because at the end of the day, there's never going to be, say, one t-shirt or one piece of art where everyone's like, this is amazing, this shirt fits great, everything is perfect. Not going to happen, dude. You just got to try and put out what you think is cool so that you can actually back it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I mean, you're your own best salesman.
Absolutely.
If you can't get behind it, if you're not excited about it, why would you expect anyone else to be willing to invest in it?
Dude, absolutely. And sometimes that's what starts off these new trends, is like when somebody does their own thing, which is a little bit outside of the box. It could be freaking belly shirts or whatever, but all of a sudden Kanye's wearing one and it's like, oh my God, it's the next hottest thing.
This is the next big thing.
Or
Now, I did
whatever.
say a little bit, to contrast just a little bit earlier on in the seminar, I did say, you can test your audience. We have social media, we have tools available to us that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to make something. You can put something out into the world on Instagram or Facebook and say, hey, we're thinking about this new design for a shirt,
Yeah.
and see what the likes say, see what the comments say. If people
Yeah.
are blowing up about it, well, maybe this is the design to move forward with. So I agree with the, do what you think is cool, but don't be afraid to query your supporters either.
Oh, absolutely. I fully agree with that. I mean, in the beginning, it's probably way more likely that artists at the beginning of their career, be it, visual, band, whatever, it's probably more likely that they're going to do that in the beginning to try and help them find their own look or their own vision a little bit. It's kind of unlikely that you would see somebody like Billy Talent polling their audience about which design they like, because they just know what they do and they're confident in that. But I mean, yeah, I would for sure recommend that for artists in the middle to low range of experience. Definitely.
Well, thanks so much, Ricky. I think that's good. We're good, about an hour seminar here. I appreciate your time and
Man.
for you
Hey,
joining us.
I gotta say that I appreciate your time, because for any of you guys listening out there that don't know Murad as well as I do, you've been working so hard in the scene for years. Like, you are one of the most dedicated people to it. And all of the work you do, you always do it with passion. You always do it for all the right reasons. Like, man, there's not a lot of people like you. So,
Wow.
oh yeah, Murad. And I've stayed at your house like at least 20 times. He's done shows from my band, taking me to Pita Grill, probably giving me a bunch of beer.
My pleasure.
Beautiful,
My
man.
pleasure. Well, thanks so much for your time, and tell people how they can find you if they're looking to get their merch produced.
Website, presstimedesign.com. Our Instagram, which we're pretty active on, which is just at @presstimedesign. Same thing on Facebook. So those are all the places that would be really easy to get in touch with us and get a really quick response. Normally, I would say call into the office as well. But because of the whole COVID thing, sometimes, our hours are a little more,
All over the place?
yeah, all over the place than they normally are. So we have been in the shop quite a lot lately, but like, that can change. And I'd say hit us up on the internet is the best way.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Of course, man.
All
Appreciate
right.
it too, Brad.